Turning back now to Israel, where pressure is growing to scale back its military campaign. At a rally in Tel Aviv over the weekend, Israelis demanded a deal to bring the remaining hostages home. This after the Israel Defense Forces confirmed they mistakenly killed 3 hostages who they say were waving a white flag. Meanwhile, Israel's bombardment of Gaza continues as its allies call for a change in strategy. Our Ramy Inocencio has more from Israel.
Israel doubled down on its mission to eliminate Hamas, even as pressure rose for a ceasefire after Israel's military mistakenly killed 3 hostages Friday. Families of those still captive in Gaza more desperate than ever.
We don't want them back in bags.
We are kind of hanging on a thread, and that thread is Joseph Biden.
Michael Oren is Israel's former ambassador to the U.S.
To what degree is U.S. pressure actually working?
It's going to work to a degree. There may come a time where we would have to say to our American allies, thank you for all you've done, but.
But that break has not happened yet. On Saturday, Israel's prime minister revealed the restart of hostage talks with Qatar and Egypt. And on Sunday, Israel reopened its direct crossing for aid into Gaza at Kerem Shalom, requested by the U.S., as desperate Gazans ransacked a UN aid truck crossing in from Egypt. Piling on pressure now, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin landed in Israel hours ago.
What do you expect he's going to hammer home to Netanyahu?
He's going to say, start honing the operation.
If and until a ceasefire is agreed, Israel's strikes against Hamas continue, but destroying refugee camps, hospitals, homes, and families. In Khan Yunis, an Israeli tank shell hit a crowded maternity ward, injuring several and killing a teenage girl. The shell hit her head here, said a doctor. She was left with half a face.
And Secretary Austin should have just wrapped up his bilateral with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the past 20 minutes or so, according to the schedule that we've seen. In about 90 minutes' time, Chanel, we're going to see them both appear together at a press conference and hear if there's any agreement or any disagreement about any potential wind down.
And Ramy, we're seeing all of this international pressure mounting now on Netanyahu and his government to sort of ease its offensive. I wonder what you're hearing from people on the ground. How do people in Israel feel about this?
Right, from the U.S., from the U.K., France, Germany, and the EU. But here in Israel, everyone we've spoken to have said that basically it comes down to the survival of Israel and that they cannot care and that they do not care. Picking up on my interview with Ambassador Oren just now, he said that there is some degree that the U.S. can influence Israel, but when push comes to shove, even if they, for example, withhold a veto at another, say, UN ceasefire resolution in the Security Council, Israel will still do what it needs to do in order to survive.
Okay, Ramy Inocencio, thanks so much. Well, we've heard a lot about Hamas tunnels that Israel says are used to transport supplies and carry out attacks. But it is extremely rare to get an inside look at one. Charlie D'Agata did just that during a recent trip into Gaza, escorted by the Israeli military.
To get into Gaza, we pass through the breached blast walls of the Erez Crossing, a path of destruction from Hamas militants on the way to their murderous rampage.
So the Erez Crossing has now become, as you can see, a war zone where Israeli forces come in and out, crossing into Gaza in this fight.
Only around 500 yards from the border, Israeli forces discovered this, essentially right under their noses.
You can just see how wide this tunnel is. For starters, you can drive a small car through it.
Along the walls, piping for water, electricity, communication wires, a warren of reinforced concrete used to hide weapons and hold hostages. It runs for more than 2.5 miles long. Even amid the vast network of Hamas tunnels, this came as a surprise.
This is the biggest tunnel that we found ever.
Ever?
Ever.
A hint of the complexities in the search for Hamas fighters, says IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari.
It means hunting them down and finding them wherever they are, inside the tunnels and above the ground.
Does that carry risk for the hostages that are being held?
I think we are managing the risk. First of all, remember that rescuing our hostages, we want to bring our hostages alive back home. It's very complex. We want them alive back home.
Later that day, we learned of the hostages mistakenly shot dead by Israeli soldiers, not only raising fears over remaining hostages, but questions like why troops fired on unarmed men in the first place. Charlie D'Agata, inside Gaza.